You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Matt Adams, I'm Dave Griffiths. We appreciate you joining us here as we are now 3 weeks into Colts camp. They are very soon to be knocking heads with another team as the first preseason game is coming up this week. We've got great news to share, and we've got what could be dangerous news to share here on this podcast. A little bit of everything coming up here, Chap. That's what preseason football is all about.
They've got 3 practices remaining at Grand Park.
That's it.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. And they'll have the Arizona Cardinals and one Marvin Harrison Jr. in here next week as well. So
my big question, and I saw him in Canton, is will Marvin Harrison Sr. be here?
That is a good question.
I think so, but will we have access to Marvin Harrison Sr.?
That's a better question.
Probably not.
No, he's
you know those Syracuse guys.
Yes.
It's those Syracuse guys. They're just pains in the butt to deal with.
Yeah, all of us.
All of
I'll
them.
just shout
Yes,
out the
indeed.
orange.
On a weekly basis, we deal with one of them.
Exactly. You know from firsthand experience. Our firsthand experience at Colts camp today is where we will start, as the Colts are out there doing 7-on-7 drills. Josh Downs, ball to him. Nick Cross, maybe a slightly more physical play than you would expect in 7-on-7 drills. Chap, you're the one who saw it firsthand. I did not. I was still arriving for some late interviews. So why don't you break down what you saw as Josh Downs is the latest Colt to go down and need to be helped off the field today at training camp?
Yeah, it was just 7-on-7 work, and it was by the sideline, and he goes down, and he was tackled by Nick Cross, and it's they try to have physical training camps, which is relative terms, but you don't bring down receivers and you don't bring down running backs. And Steichen was visibly PO'd about that. And he said so pretty much after practice, as you know, we're competing, but we don't bring guys down. So, yeah, unfortunate. And I'm sure in Nick Cross, what he said after practice was, we're out there competing and, basically stuff happens. So unfortunate, but hopefully, and you were mentioning, you saw earlier, there's a report out there that.
Right. I'll shout out Jeremy Fowler, who had seems like the first national report on the issue. He says wide receiver Josh Downs, this is on Twitter, suffered a high ankle sprain during practice today per source. The outlook right now is that Downs could miss about a month, but the Colts are sorting that out. A key piece to the Colts offense goes down.
And I just got a message from someone closer to the team than Jeremy Fowler, and they're not ready to make any prognosis yet. They're still getting exams, and they're hoping it's just a sprain, not a high. A high is 4 to 6. I mean, generally,
right.
And that kind of fluctuates on what your position is. 4 to 6 for a guard's a lot worse than 4 to 6, or not the same as 4 to 6 for a receiver.
Right.
So we'll see. He's going to miss some time. He just is. The only way this could have been better if he had done it the first week of practice, to where you have more time. So we'll see. And you don't want to overreact, but at the same time, I wrote about it, which we just posted, is this would be a significant blow to this offense. Mm-hmm. They have very few big play guys where they can really take it and score. And, JT's one. And then it's Josh Downs. I mean, you can't put Mitchell in that category yet. Michael Pittman, it always seems like we're picking on Michael Pittman. That's not who he is as a player. The big play guy. Josh Downs is a guy that can score. Take that slant and go. So you don't want to lose your playmaker guys because there's not a lot of them. And if he's out for a month, that would put the opener in jeopardy.
In question, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it would.
So we'll see. I guess you keep your fingers crossed that it's not a high ankle. Normally, just to clue in people how the sausage is made, when you see the national reports that this, that, and the other, whether it's a visit from a player or an injury, it's the agent. It just is. That's how these things work. Of all the teams I've been around and dealt with, this regime does not leak stuff to the media.
Right.
Unless it's Jim Irsay, which when he leaks it to me, I'm fine with it.
Oh, you can share it then.
But they just don't. That's not the way they operate. And Chris Ballard does not have leaks on his staff. He just doesn't. So, we'll keep our fingers crossed. And you just, up until now, they've dealt with a calf injury, a hammy or whatever, and of course Samson Ebukan's Achilles. But so far, knock on wood, they've been sort of avoiding the big stuff. So we'll see how this thing plays out.
I would also say, knock on wood, in this situation, when you initially see it and you know it's a lower leg injury, then you're worried about the knee right away or an Achilles, because the Colts have had their fair share of Achilles injuries over the past couple years.
I've seen that a lot.
And the ankle is one that usually heals, unless it's last year like Danny Pinter broke his ankle. When it breaks, then you're in trouble. But if it is even a high ankle sprain, you say it's 4 to 6 weeks. On the big side of that, 6 weeks, let's say, he misses the first 2-3 weeks of the season, and then you have him for the last 15, for crying out loud. So if indeed that is the case, and it's a high ankle sprain, that there are far, far worse ways this could have gone. Matt, I think when you see and when we hear, initially, when it starts spreading around like wildfire that Josh Downs goes down with an injury, there are far worse things that could have happened if indeed that it ends up being a high ankle sprain, as is reported.
Well, and the good thing, there's nothing good about it.
We'll
say that.
Everything's in relative terms.
In relative terms, you can still make sure they give Josh Downs enough time to fully recover from this thing, because there's no reason to bring him back for the opener if in week 3 it's still a lingering problem and then he's gone for significantly more time.
Yeah.
And initially they put Anthony Gould out there in the slot, and he can make plays. He's fast. Remember, he's brought in primarily to be a kick returner,
right?
Punt returner. But they've seen some things with him running second team, third team. But let's not kid ourselves. If they're without Josh Downs for any amount of time, it's a loss. Sets a Colts franchise rookie record, not an Indy era, but a Colts record with 68 catches last year. Had 125 against Cleveland. So this is a player, and he has had the best camp of anybody not named Julian Blackman and Latu. I think he's had that strong of a camp. So we'll see. And again, it's a deep area as far as receivers. It's like when you lose Ebukam. That was a really deep area. But Ebukam was your sack leader, and Josh Downs was your flash guy, the guy that he takes that 7-yard slant and he goes 40 or more.
The thing about the difference, in my opinion, about losing Ebukam and Downs, like in both areas, you think the Colts are relatively deep. I would say probably more so on the defensive line anyway. But for your receivers, like everybody has a specific role. Very much so. It's, I think, pretty well defined. I was talking to Kylan Granson after practice today. That was the big interview we're doing for our Blue Zone, our pregame show before the first preseason game, which is this weekend. As I said, Fox 59 will be carrying this first preseason game against the Broncos on Sunday evening. It's 7 o'clock, I believe, on Sunday evening. Matt, if you could double check. But I think
it was a 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Is it a 1 o'clock? Okay, it's a 1 o'clock game. Excuse me. I think the next two are 7 o'clock. That's my fault.
You're right.
So there we go. We lead into the 1 o'clock kick on Sunday, and you can see my interview with Kylan Granson then. But anyway, I was talking with him.
He's a good guy.
I love Kylan. He's the man. But we were talking just about roles, about specific roles, and that's the case in the tight end room, because there's a bunch of them, and there's some different body types, and they each have what they're supposed to do well for the team. Like Josh Downs has a very unique role on this team that he can do that other guys really can't. You mentioned Anthony Gould, Chap. Yes, I think he has some of the same talents, but he's also a rookie. So he's not as far along, certainly now, as Downs. And as you mentioned, and as I've brought up, Matt, remember last week we were talking about our receiver rankings, and obviously Pittman's one, but I thought that maybe Downs could be the guy to challenge him to really top 70 catches this year. I imagine Pittman's probably in line for 100 again, but I changed my mind last week after seeing how well Downs was playing in camp. He could be up there too. So,
and again, like you said, it's maybe what they do, and Rick Venturi and I were talking, and he mentioned it first, is maybe put Pittman inside. He thinks Pittman might be a better
slot than your other options, and have Mitchell on the outside.
Pierce and Mitchell outside, because of all these guys, Pittman's got the body type. He's big and he is tough as it comes.
Right.
And but Downs it's just different. You're right. It's just different. You don't like to stereotype guys into roles because maybe a guy misses a game or two. Although Downs didn't miss any last year.
Well, and Downs came out of college polished as it was. He was really good for the Colts. He's only gotten better from that standpoint. He's got a shiftiness and a savviness about him that you're not going to get if you have a rookie there slotted inside.
So
let's again, worst case, he misses a game or two. It will change how they do things offensively. Maybe Granson.
It's possible.
He's sort of that.
Yeah, move him around.
Yeah, he can move around. So, but let's not kid ourselves. If he's out for any amount of time, he will be missed.
I think the Pittman idea is a unique one, and it's a good one because typically you have your idea. The slot guy is a smaller guy, a shifty guy. Your Julian Edelman, your Wes Welker, your Josh Downs, your Jamison Crowder, those type of players. But I think one of the best receivers of the past decade, certainly one of the most underrated receivers of the past decade or 12 years or so, is Keenan Allen, who played for the Chargers and is now with the Bears. And he's been a slot receiver for a good portion of his career. He plays a lot on the inside. So you can be a big guy and have success on the inside. But again, if the Colts go down a path where they're going to have to miss some time with Josh Downs, there are several different options for them. And I think Pittman will have to step up. I think Granson is a really good candidate for that, or the other tight ends, whoever it might be, to take some of those middle short field. What's his name? Jack Doyle, 8.6 yards per catch.
7.5.
Excuse me. I gave him a little bit too much credit there.
It's funny what you mentioned about Keenan Allen. I remember talking to Reggie last year, 2 years ago, about Pitt and the kind of receiver he is. And, Pitt thinks he's a home run hitter. He just does. And that's Pitt because, God love him, that's Pitt. And Reggie said, he said, I think he's Keenan Allen. And,
which is high praise.
Which, doggone it.
You might not be Tyreek Hill, but you're Keenan Allen.
And it's like we always talk about it. It's okay not to be a top 8 guy, a top 10 guy. It's okay to not be Joe Burrow or Josh Allen because those guys just are not a lot of them. Pitt's a very, very good receiver. He just isn't what other guys might be. So, and remember at the end of his career, the last, 5 or 6 years of his career, Reggie was moved in the slot. And he wasn't good in the slot. He was great in the slot. But we're going far afield on this with Downs. He'll probably miss a game. I don't know. But if he comes back, like you were saying, I think he's targeted for a very productive season. He had 3 touchdowns. He'll get more when you've got this offense like they've got. So hopefully he won't miss much time.
So he's just emerged as a favorite of whichever quarterback is throwing to him, whether it's Gardner Minshew, whether it's Richardson, Flacco, whomever it is back there throwing to him. It's like Downs is our guy.
Right. Well, and it's not a security blanket. Although that's what that guy can be. No, this is a guy that you hit these guys in stride. And if you got people outside that you got to pay attention to and you got Taylor in the backfield, all of a sudden that slot guy, he's got to be the guy. And once he does, the field's wide open.
We'll let Josh Downs himself have the last word as he posted to his Instagram story just a quick shot of a Bible verse. It was from James 1, 2, and 3. It was the consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith develops perseverance. That verse. So there you go. That's his first reaction to the news.
And the good thing again is, knock on wood, is it's been a very quiet camp as far as injuries. I mean, everybody has them, but if all this is, all is in quotes, an ankle sprain and it's 4 or 5 weeks, then like you said, it could be a lot worse. We've seen a lot worse, and so hopefully they move on from this. And again, we're going to find out a lot about it. It does, in the old silver lining, it does give them a chance to look at other players in that position. How might they have to adjust? I'd rather be doing the adjustment things now than in week 8. So, and I'm sure they've kind of done that before, but when you really have to do it, then you have to be very more serious and committed to what you're doing. So there are silver linings, although I'd just soon have these guys out there all 17 games.
Let's evaluate this from another perspective, and that is the play from Nick Cross on this specific play. 7-on-7 is not a play, not a scenario that you usually see a ton of contact. And like you mentioned earlier, Chap, as physical as you want to be in training camp to get guys ready for a physical NFL season, it's very unusual to see receivers and running backs, and especially, obviously, quarterbacks, taken to the ground. There's banging and bumping, especially with running backs on running plays, and some receivers over the middle here and there. But to see them actually physically taken to the ground is very much a rarity. I'll say this for Nick Cross. He's in a battle. He's in a heck of a battle for the starting spot. So he feels when he goes out there, as he should, that he needs
every play matters.
Exactly. That every play matters. Every play could be the difference between starting and not. And that means every play could be the difference of your future in the NFL or not.
Right.
I will also say this. If you can't follow instructions, you can't play. And
at free safety, you got to make decisions.
Exactly. One of the positions that's super important. If you don't listen to your coaches when they say, don't bring down the wide receivers, how can they trust you to listen to them when they say, don't let anybody behind you or cover for this guy?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Exactly. I forgot. I was trying really hard, Coach.
It slipped my mind.
Yes. So yeah, it's very much a two factors that you have to evaluate together. I think one is probably stronger than the other in this case, but nevertheless, I think
you mean don't tackle.
Exactly. That one is the one that I was implicitly implying, but you hit the nail on the head. I think that this, it's a bad look for Cross. He was actually on the mic today strangely enough, that he was scheduled to speak to us.
It was scheduled that way.
Exactly. He didn't come to us just because of the play. He came because he was scheduled to speak to the media, and we asked him about the play. He talked about, hey, we're competing out here. We're trying to get each other ready. Josh Downs is my guy. I love him. I'm going to check on him after this. So that was his explanation, basically, of the play and what happened. And in one sense, like I said, he's right. You are competing, and you have to compete hard, and you have to get your fellow teammates ready, and you have to prove that you're the guy who deserves to be out there on the field. But in order to do that, like I said, you have to listen to the coaches, and you have to obey what the coaches are telling you. So for Nick, and for a position that still is not entirely solidified, even though the Colts' first depth chart did come out,
not even remotely,
and he was
solidified.
and he was there as the starting free safety. This cannot be a great look for him upon the final decisions as to who is starting in the back end on week one.
Right. And again, will this be held against him? I don't know. Maybe not, because they're so, in my mind, so desperate to have somebody take that position. Mm-hmm. And I thought Gus Bradley was incredibly honest the other day. Somebody asked about, how close are you to naming a guy? He said, well, as soon as somebody shows the consistency. And then he said, I don't think we're close to being there. The season's 3 weeks away.
That sounds pretty close to me.
Holy mackerel!
We've got safety on the rundown a little bit later, but since we're talking about it,
we never follow your stuff.
Exactly. I noticed it's really hard to time code these shows, but I was just going to say, to that point that you're making, they played Julian Blackmon at free safety some in the past few practices, and that just shows you we don't trust what we've got at free safety.
Right, and I love to spend time talking to Rick Venturi. He thinks that a possible fallback is that they go and they put Julian Blackmon at free safety because it's easier to cover.
You trust the guy back there too.
Right, and you can live with mistakes more at strong safety than you can free safety. I mean, let's go back to the last game of the year against Houston.
Right,
when Juju had to think he had to believe he had deep help, and he didn't. So that you shouldn't be having these questions, and we can either hit this now or come back to it. But you shouldn't be having these personnel questions at a prime position so deep into training camp. This may be something that comes back and bites them in the rear end.
No, I think this is a good time to talk about it because it stems perfectly out of the Josh Downs discussion. The fact that no one has really stepped up in that position has been, I think, disappointing at best and disconcerting at worst, somewhere along that scale. Obviously, they haven't played a preseason game yet, so there's still some time before the season begins to throw people out there when the just the bullets are live, so to speak, and see how they react in that time. But I mean, I remember Nick Cross's rookie year. He had a pretty good preseason in that time that he was out on the field.
He may have started the opener.
I think he did. He started the first 2 games, I think, of his career. And then what happened? He lost the job.
He's not ready yet.
Exactly. He wasn't ready. And we learned that in a hurry. And he's started 2 games since.
Was it the last 2 games of last season?
I think so, yeah.
When they decided that Rodney Thomas wasn't the guy.
Exactly. Wasn't good enough at the time. So that's still something that the Colts are, and they're still looking internal for this. Remember, before the training camp, this training camp began, Chris Ballard basically said it's not out of the realm of possibility to go out and get somebody, but he wants to see what the guys in what they've got in-house. And they keep looking at the guys in-house, as Gus Bradley just said, as you mentioned the other day, and nothing has been standing out to them. Some other teams have done things at safety specifically.
Some teams in the division.
The Tennessee Titans.
Which has to really rankle the fan base.
Right?
Oh, it's
right?
Yes.
Yeah, Matt's like,
not a big fan of that move. Yeah.
Condre Diggs, the safety, formerly with Seattle, now with the Tennessee Titans because they signed him to a 1-year, $5 million deal.
This is after signing Jamal Adams.
This is after signing Jamal Adams. Yes.
And the thing that you mentioned, I think he got 1 year, $3 million, and Adams might have got 1 year with a max of $5 million. The thing that we sit in the press room and talk about, because we're like a bunch of old ladies in there, is
speak for yourself.
You're a young lady, but it's an obvious area of concern. And the possible solution, isn't going to cost you much in terms of, and we've talked about this, it's going to cost you 1 year, $3 million, $4 million. And then that's only an issue is how much of it is you guarantee. So I go back to, they signed Mike Adams 1 year.
Yep.
And
Pops.
Late Pops. And then Rodney McLeod. I just don't understand when you believe you have a team capable of contending for whatever we want to say they're capable of contending for, and you've left yourself vulnerable at such an important position.
I think Mike Adams is actually eligible for the Hall of Fame in 2025.
I saw him in Canton.
Yeah,
and he looks like he can still play.
Oh well, maybe you can put in a call. He can delay that eligibility for a couple years. Try to stack up a few more good seasons there.
But you're one injury away at safety. Heaven forbid.
Yep.
Blackman goes down. What are you doing?
And like the frustrating part, and I go back to 2021 with who at quarterback here, and coming into the season, no matter if you liked him or you didn't like him, Carson Wentz, the backup.
You had to say the name.
I did. I have to. The backup quarterback was Jacob Eason, which was just a ludicrous decision to go into the season with Jacob Eason
are you okay, Matt?
as your backup quarterback.
I always say this on the podcast, but the deer in the headlight look when he had to come into that game,
oh my gosh,
was just your worst fears reimagined. It was like Manning looking at Sorgi in the AFC Championship game and being like, "Be ready." My hand's a little bit sore.
But my point to this is like Carson had an injury history, so why wouldn't you get a good backup quarterback
be prepared.
for him? There are obvious needs this Colts team has had in previous years under Chris Ballard as general manager that they have not met entering the season. Obvious needs. He has not met them, and it has come back to bite them in the butt. It happened that year when Carson had to get knocked out and Eason came in. And then the next week, Wentz is trying to play on about 1/4 of an ankle
at Tennessee,
and not being able to move around at all because he was the best option, even though he could not do anything. Exactly. Right. So that's just the first example that comes to my mind. This is the most recent example that there's just such an obvious problem here that no one is stepping up in this one position that seems like a fairly important position. Don't let anybody behind you. Don't give up the big play. How much do we talk about? How much does Shane Steichen talk about the need for big plays on offense? How much does Chris Ballard talk about getting dynamic players on offense that can create those big plays? Who's the eraser on defense? You don't have one right now. There's no one back in that free safety position that has taken the job as theirs, and that has to be a concern, and it's a concern that they haven't done anything about it because it's a repetition of history that this front office has done. They've seen problems. They have not fixed problems. They've gone to the season saying, we hope our guys are the answer, and in the past it has not been the answer.
I think part of the problem or issue, whatever, we see it as a problem, they don't, is their commitment to their own. I think they really, really are committed, invested in their young players. Last year at corner, this year at corner, they really want to believe and trust that these players will come through, which is fine.
Yeah, belief is one thing, but results are another thing entirely.
And they wouldn't, but you could argue, well, if I bring in a veteran safety, he's going to take snaps from the young guys. Well, so what? You know, this is big boy football, and what I keep coming back to, and it just drives me crazy, is it's not like, well, if we have to sign Justin Simmons, who's by the way in New Orleans for a visit
today,
so it's not going to cost you 1 year $10 million. It's just not. It's going to cost you 1 year. All these veterans are getting the $3 and $4 million, and if you have to guarantee it, fine. In the realm of the cap, that's not a big deal. So. It's just that this is an obvious issue that we all see, and Gus Bradley sees, and there are options to fix it. 1 year, yes. 1 year, short term, yes, and they're not doing it. Just wait till Simmons signs, and then you're down to the fourth or fifth or sixth best free agent out there at the position, and even if let's say that Saints don't sign Simmons and he's here, he comes here next week, then my thing would be, great, what took you so long?
Right.
So it's just kind of strange, but that's kind of this is where they are.
Yeah. So we'll certainly be following this over the next couple weeks before the season begins, and who knows? Who knows at this point? But I think that's about all we can say about the safety position right now.
It reminds me. Last year, I don't know whether it was the Cleveland, New Orleans games, whatever, around that time, when they were just having trouble at corner. And we talked to Gus, and they were going to go with Tony Brown.
Yeah, New Orleans.
Yep. We want to see what Tony can do.
Yes.
Really?
We saw what he could do. Unfortunately for Tony.
In week 6 or 7.
Yeah, we'll see what he can do. And I was with Daryl Baker Jr., who was the name I couldn't remember the other week when we were pontificating about corners.
You did say it would come back to you.
It did, and it did, to be fair. Sometime during this week. I know I was down in Holiday World celebrating with my family just the end of summer and watching my kids go down water slides, and I said, Daryl Baker Jr.,
And they said, what?
Exactly. And then everybody looked at me like I was crazy, because I am. The Colts have released their first depth chart of training camp, an unofficial, of course, depth chart. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The third wide receiver is listed, of course, cagely as Alec Pierce or Adonai Mitchell. There's a couple of backup offensive line spots that give the either-ors. The left guard and center both list Danny Pinter or Tanner Bordelini.
I'm not sure why you do that for
or
backup
Wesley
positions.
French. Well, you gotta throw them in somehow. Yeah, exactly.
But they're listed or on a starting position, I can understand.
Yeah,
Exactly.
on the backup position. I guess they couldn't decide whether they wanted to be the backup guard or tackle or backup center.
Yep. Matt Gonzalez is penciled in as the reserve right tackle, Blake Freeland at left, although I think they really intend to have the best backup tackle play, whoever that might be.
At either side.
Right, exactly. Your starting tight ends are Mo Alley Cox and Kylan Granson, not Kyle Granson.
You're absolutely right.
Yes, Kylan Granson.
Is he trashing your outline?
Jeez, Matt,
I
unbelievable.
think so. I do make the
Unacceptable.
occasional mistype.
Right. Drew Ogletree and Jelani Woods backing up, as is Will Mallory, of course, too. Trey Sermon is the number 2 running back, and it's Evan Hall is 4th, and then it's Goodson is 3rd. So that's the running backs group. Nick Cross, like we've talked about, is the free safety starter with Rodney Thomas backing him up for now. Latu is listed as the backup defensive end for Kwity Paye, and then on the other side it's Tyquan Lewis and Dio Odengbo.
I've seen it more the other way. I've seen Latu more on
opposite
Tyquan's
Kwity Paye.
Side. Right.
Yeah, I have too. But this is an unofficial depth chart.
Yeah, this is just what they put down.
Right.
So.
Right.
Because I think today, Taekwon wasn't out there and Latu was over there an awful lot. And
That's
I tell
correct.
you, he's had a great camp.
Yep, like you said, if you're picking out the best players with camp, Julian Blackmon, Latu, and Josh Downs would be 3 of the 4 on the Mount Rushmore
Right.
of 2024 Colts training camp for sure. I think the other one you could have a good debate over, but those 3 certainly belong up there. Kick returners, Dallas Flowers, Anthony Gould, Josh Downs. Punt returner, Josh Downs, Anthony Gould, Dallas Flowers. So those 3 guys in some form or fashion. And your top 4 cornerbacks, Juju, Jalen, Flowers, and Darrell Baker Jr. are all listed 1 through 4 on the outside, of course.
I'm not crazy about that group, but it's not bad. And you see some potential there. That's why I say I compare that to safety where you think, man,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Because
Right.
I think with those 4 corners, I think we've seen enough from those guys that they could be good enough. I don't want to downplay it.
Here's my thought on cornerback right now through the first 3 weeks of training camp is that Michael Pittman Jr. hasn't done anything too dynamic, and he's not getting the ball all the time in the offense. Kind of he was last year, I think, much more so than he is now. So maybe the addition of Juju Brents has helped in that area kind of limit him a little bit. And if you're limiting Pittman, then that's probably a pretty good thing.
Right.
And so we'll see when like I said, when the Bullets are live, but just it's hard really to evaluate the best cornerbacks in the NFL because they don't get the ball thrown at them. So that's kind of my theory that, hey, if the ball isn't going to Michael Pittman Jr. as often, maybe it's because the cornerbacks are doing a fairly good job. Right. So,
and one difference too about the corners that we haven't seen with the safeties is we have heard the front office and the coaching staff talk about their belief and confidence in this team. Yeah, they took their lumps last year. We felt that was a learning experience. We think they'll come back and be better this year. We really haven't heard that about safety. The safety question has been more, we don't know who we're going to play back there, essentially has been the question at safety.
Right.
Mike Chappell was in Canton, Ohio last week, and scenic Canton, Ohio, for the enshrinement ceremony for the 2024 class to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Leading off after a slight weather delay there in Canton.
90 minutes, and it rained like a mother.
It certainly did.
Looked
But
like
then
it.
from what I understand, as soon as it got dry, they whisked them up there to get them talking rather quickly. And Dwight Freeney was the first to take the stage. Pro Football Hall of Fame member number 372 is Dwight Freeney, the Indianapolis and Syracuse legend. A great spin move, a sack master, and all-around good dude from any and all players who have hung out with him and came to celebrate with him as well. Chap, your impressions from the weekend as Colts got together to celebrate another one of their own entering the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, one thing that's funny is on a personal level, when you get really selfish, is Dwight was the leadoff hitter, and once he was finished after 8 or 9 minutes, I didn't care if it rained the rest of the day.
Send it down.
Got our guy.
Or done.
But he was good. He may have set a record for people he thanked individually by name, but that's what you use it for. That's your time to do it. I'd rather do that than have a guy go up there and give some 8 or 9 minute a deep vision of life or whatever, and this was a chance for the player to do that. And then I had the chance to go to the Jim Irsay always puts on nice receptions. He does. He did it for Tony and Marvin, and then Peyton had one, and Edgerrin had one, and they're just extravagant. They're at a country club in Canton, and Dwight had his where Peyton had his. And what's cool about it for me is they bring his bronze bust. It's sitting there as you walk in to this vineyard that we were at. But it's amazing how many former Colts you see, and that's what I like. Is we deal with these guys on a daily and a yearly basis, and then they're gone, and you don't see them again. You get a chance. I'll drop another Syracuse name, James Mungro.
Yeah.
I'm standing there talking to Justin Snow. Here, I'll be name dropping for a few minutes, and I apologize.
That's what this
long
portion-
snapper, Colts long snapper, Justin Snow.
And a guy bumps into me, and I look at him, and he says, James Mungro. I said, oh, yeah. So it's just kind of cool to see Larry Triplets, and then I look down the way, and Bob Sanders is standing there, and he can still play. You want a strong safety or free safety.
There's a strong right there.
Yeah. And we talk for a while, and it's just really, Peyton shows up, and Edger and Marvin, and then here's Marcus Allen walking through here because other Hall of Famers come to pay their Richard Dent. But it's really kind of cool that all of these Colts have stayed close with each other. Mike Doss was there, and it's really kind of neat that there is that fraternity. Whenever you hear about culture, that's culture, and that's culture at the highest level. But Dwight handled it really well, and it's just really kind of cool. And we'll see if we can get Reggie and Adam Vinatieri was there.
Yeah,
love to talk to Vinny. He and I have been trying to hook up for lunch. We just can't get.
He might be able to play strong safety. He's pretty jacked right
now. He's buffed, and he's first time eligible next year. We'll see if we can. I think in my mind he's
got to be first.
You
go,
say
right?
his name and you almost sit down because he won 2 Super Bowls, and he kick-started New England's legacy with those kicks against the Raiders. In the snow. But then we got Reggie, and we'll see if Mathis. He's had trouble gaining traction, but it's going to be Eli Manning. We could do a whole podcast on whether Eli Manning's first ballot.
Oh yeah,
I don't think he is. I think he's a Hall of Famer, but not first ballot. But it's really kind of cool. And I didn't go to it this year, but when the Friday night that they do the gold jacket presentation where they've got all the Hall of Famers in town to welcome in the new group, and they form a gauntlet, and these guys walk down. It's just amazing, and that's the history of the sport. Peyton was there again for the ceremony, and they're up there on the stage, Peyton and Edgerrin and Marvin Polian and Tony Dungy. And it's just really kind of cool to see. And Jim Irsay presented him. He was out there in his wheelchair, and I know he doesn't want to be in the wheelchair just because, on so many levels. But it showed you how important it was for him to be there, to have a third player say, you're the guy of all the people in my life, in my athletic life or personal life that I want to present me for Hall of Fame. And that means something. It means something to Irsay. So pretty cool weekend. Good.
Glad you enjoyed yourself. And yeah, it was just the latest class to go in. A bunch of greats. And Dwight is certainly one of them. So a line to come. But I've been following, just trying to see some other outside of Indy perspective. And when other people give like their classes on Twitter, I say other people. These are like media members or major football follows on Twitter. These aren't Twitter eggs that I'm talking about. These are actual people. Like I haven't seen Vinatieri's name honestly mentioned when they put on a class for next year. So
when they say these are my 5, and I'm thinking,
exactly.
And he's not. You don't mention him,
right? And I think, and so I'm just warning you. You might have a little.
I've already
bit of a hill
been
to climb.
warned from inside the room. Somebody mentioned, he's a Hall of Famer, but I'm not sure he's first ballot. I'm thinking,
right?
Are you kidding me?
Right.
I feel like, and I know that they're just going to say, well, he's a kicker, but the thing is, he is the best ever at what you did, and when you're the best ever at what you did. Is that not what the Pro Football Hall of Fame is for?
Right. And I think if you look at the list immediately, the one that there's certain like grading scales about how significant players' careers are. I think Luke Kuechly has the highest grade of this first class out of anybody there from what I've seen at least. I think you look at the careers of Luke Kuechly and Adam Vinatieri. You can't tell the story of the NFL without Adam Vinatieri. You can tell the story of the NFL without Luke Kuechly for sure. He was a very good player for a couple years.
And that's not diminishing Luke Kuechly.
No, I don't intend to do that at all. But you say, was he the best linebacker in the league? He might have been for a couple years there. He was probably the best tackling linebacker in the league. Was Adam
Defensive Player of the Year one year?
I believe he was.
Yes.
Was Adam Vinatieri the best kicker in the league? Probably for a good portion of the time that he was in there. Certainly the most clutch. And that's the position where clutch matters just as much, if not more so, than any other, because you come in not cold because you're practicing on the sidelines, but you come in, you get 3 steps and a swing of the leg to do your job, and that's it.
Those kicks that he hit in the infamous Tuck Rule game. Those should not have had any chance to go in the conditions those went in.
And what happens if he doesn't make them?
Completely different NFL history.
Does New England, do they come back next year? And you just don't know. I remember Pat McAfee said one time, he said he always used to pound on Vinny's drum. He said he's the only guy that's out there every time he's on the field, points are at issue. And he's right. And, Vinatieri, he's probably not top 15 in accuracy, career accuracy. He's probably, 83, 84%, maybe. But, boy, when it came time, I can still remember the AFC, it was a divisional game in 2006. 15-6, wasn't it?
Yep.
And that's 5
every one of them.
And one of them was a 50-yarder.
Yep.
And I want to go back one of these. Maybe I'll use it in my presentation for him is how many playoff games have been won when the team has not scored a touchdown? And probably not very many. And I keep seeing the sideline. He'll kick the field goal and then they'll flash Dungy on the sideline and he's saying money. Every time it's money. And there's just, again, there will be a pushback.
Absolutely.
There was a pushback on Devin Hester, although we're talking about different levels. We are
right
with Vinny, but it'll be, but he's a kicker.
He's just special
teams. He's a kicker, right. And yet all the time we're talking about the three levels of football, offense, defense, special teams. It took, one thing that still rankles me to no end is there is
I love what Chap brings up.
There's a lot of these,
him.
but there is one punter in the Hall of Fame, Ray Guy. He had to get in as a senior member. And I used to say all the time, we're putting her in the 15th or 20th or whatever guard or left tackle or whatever, and we don't have a punter. You should have the best player at every position. I don't care if it's Hunter Smith, Chris Gardocki, Reggie Roby.
Pat McAfee.
And it took the senior committee to get him in.
Right.
So, yeah, I look at Vinny and he still owns the NFL record for consecutive kicks at 44, I believe, consecutive, and he was like 42 when he did it.
Yep.
All-time scoring leader, and I'm giving you my presentation. But any in my mind, any other player, any other position, there's no doubt about it. But he's a kicker.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of being the NFL's all-time scoring leader, the NFL's about scoring points, isn't it?
They keep score.
They do. That's how you determine who wins.
That used to be Morton Anderson.
It did.
And it took him 6 or 7 years to get in.
It did.
But he didn't have near.
He didn't have the resume. The championship resume for me and the big, the iconic kicks that you would think that would mean something, but perhaps it doesn't. We'll find out.
We will. We certainly will. And Chap will be on the front lines. That's a couple months away. You keep getting ready for that and keep mentally preparing for the great debate between Adam Vinatieri and Marshall Yanda, the guard for the Baltimore
I see
Ravens.
those. And these are great players in their own right.
Yeah.
But doggone it, the Hall of Fame is another level. It's not the Hall of the very good.
It's not the Hall of the nice. It's
right.
not the Hall of the popular.
I'll be sitting there at night, and I've been in my head. I'm trying to figure out what new approach I take with Reggie because doggone his numbers haven't changed.
Poor Reg.
And I'm still in the PO meter that Andre Johnson, who's a Hall of Famer,
who's a heck of a player, yes,
but not before Reggie.
Right.
Not to be put in front of the line.
Right. Don't
front of the
Calvin
line.
Johnson jumped the line. Okay.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
100%.
Andre Johnson, no.
You've got that going for you this year. There's no wide receivers, I think, coming. No major wide receivers.
No, but Torrey Holt's coming back.
Yes,
so
he's still there. Steve Smith's still there, I think.
Steve Smith can't get in the room.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. He was a great player.
He was, yeah, exactly.
He was a great player. So, and the thing with Reggie, if we don't get him in this year, then Larry Fitzgerald is eligible the next year.
He's a jump to the front guy.
He's a jump to the front guy. So, yeah, it's frustrating. And the thing is, it's always people keep in mind, you only get 5 modern era players. 5. I've had people say, well, this guy shouldn't have got in. Well, who should I have taken off? I don't want to take anybody off.
Right. How many chances does a guy get before
20 years?
20. Okay.
Yeah.
And a couple guys we've put in their 20th year. That should not be a selling point. Why didn't you get in for the first 19 years? Don't put a guy in because, well, if he doesn't get in now, he goes into senior pool and those players disappear forever. That shouldn't be the criteria you use.
Well, when you're talking about great players in today's NFL that could be considered for Hall of Fame in the future, the NFL comes out with a top 100 players list.
Are we really going to go there?
Well, we're going to have to touch on it. Voted on by the players. And
which tells you a lot.
In such a serious case that I'm sure they're given a piece of paper after practice, and they're saying, hey, write down your top 20 players in the league and give it back to the PR staff. half of them probably give it right back to the PR staff and say, hey, fill this out for me.
Me.
Another half, it was really funny. Indy Star's Nate Atkins told a story when he was covering the team in Detroit. One player gave it to him and told Nate to fill it out himself. So these players want to go home after practice and not fill out the top 20 players in the league. So that's just an idea of how seriously the players take their job here of listing the top players in the league. But nevertheless, the Colts have just one player on the list, and it was number 100, the very first player. I remember talking a couple weeks ago when Zaire Franklin was listed as number 100. He's the only player that showed up for the Colts in the top 100 list, Chap. Good, bad, who cares, whatever.
Well, but
obviously, whatever, because of his reaction so far.
On his team, where does he rank?
This
team.
Like, I love
10,
Zaire,
11,
obviously,
12?
because he's from Philly and he went to Syracuse, so he's my guy.
And again, this is not a knock on him, but, Quentin, DeForest Buckner.
DeForest.
I'd put Jonathan Taylor. And then, then I'll stop. But some teams had 7 or 8 players on there. One team might have had 9.
I think San Francisco and the Dolphins were the two that had the most, like 8 or 9.
And again, the fact that you have to look at how each player voted on their top 20. So, you could leave, Mahomes was number 4.
Which is ludicrous.
You should start on all these. Well, okay, now Mahomes is number 1.
That should be already penciled in by or sharpied in before you're given the list to fill the rest out.
But these lists they're great talking points. Here we are talking about them.
Indeed.
Whether it's NFL Network, whether it's players, whatever. But Zaire, we're not dissing you. But the fact that he is the only Colt on there is ridiculous.
Don't worry, it's not Shaq. He's not going to come after us and be like,
Zaire pays attention. But no, I think he realizes. I mean, Quentin, how does not enough players put Quentin in their top 20?
Right.
Maybe even more so DeForest. Although I think if he plays 4 more years, Quentin Nelson's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, probably.
He probably will be. So it kind of makes you say, what? Really? Is that what they've got?
Well, and the thing that bothered me a little bit, I'm not going to throw a brick through a window or anything at the offices of the people who decided these things, because that's a lot of bricks and a lot of windows. But, Buckner was on the list last year in the 70s.
Right.
He had a tremendous season for the Colts last year and drops out of the top 100, which does not make any sense to me.
The thing is, if players just vote on their top 20 or whatever, there's other good defensive tackles too. Even if you're really trying to think that might make that list, and you're trying to spread it out to different players. So I understand, but it's not a total excuse, is what I'm trying.
Everybody
to get
could have had Quentin as their. Well, if you could go 21, I'd put him in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But to think that everybody left these guys off enough that they weren't top 100 is just crazy.
And one of the reports I read today said that Joe Flacco was 107 on the list.
Really? Wow.
Which is a little bit of recency bias, because he had a very good tail end of the year last year when they would have been thinking about these things.
And it also goes to show you that some teams will just vote for their own players. Like last year, I'll bet a bunch of Cleveland Browns put Joe Flacco on their list because they realized how freaking important Joe Flacco was for their season that year.
And playoff checks.
Exactly. So they're like, oh, we got to put him at least number 5 up there. Put him behind Tyreek Hill, put him behind Patrick Mahomes. But there's Joe Flacco right there as the second-ranked quarterback.
Nick Chubb was listed somewhere on there.
Yep.
And somebody said, well, they take how you played recently and your injury history. About Taylor wasn't on there. Chubb missed almost all of last year.
Hello.
So whatever. But again, the whole thing about these is to get people talking about this, and here we are.
Look at us falling right into the trap.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Who put this show together?
Colts Broncos at Lucas Oil Stadium Sunday, 1 p.m. Fox 59. Chap, your most important things to see in this first preseason game for the Colts?
Safety. Yeah. Who makes plays, and you won't be going against a top-level offense, but you'll be going against an NFL offense. And how do they play? Do they act like they know what they're doing? Do we have a receiver running free down the middle of the field? I would like to see Latu, how his training camp translate to games. He'll play some. We'll find out later in the week about the starters. The Richardson, I assume they're going to play some, because I think somebody has to follow up on Steichen on, is there a possibility the starters play? Or might the starters play? He said possibly. Last year, I went back and looked. Richardson played 3 series in the opener, 29 plays. Didn't play the next week, and then in the third game, he played the entire half.
Right.
And he needs to play. I mean, I tend to be the guy that I don't want to expose these guys to injury. Jonathan Taylor, man, I just don't.
Give him a ball cap.
Does he need it? I always like to have one hit before the season, just so that the first hit isn't in a game. Although they can get that done in the scrimmages,
Right?
They really can.
So they've got those joint practices. They can take their licks.
Right. So on that, Richardson, maybe that's a little different. I wouldn't put Pitt out there very much. And as much as Richardson plays, the starting offensive line's going to play.
Got to if he's out there.
You don't put
Let's
backups
go
out
Tanner Bordolini and Matt Gonzalez and
Blake Freeland and
We're going to solve this reserve tackle thing right now.
there we go. All right, Anthony, go lineup.
Yeah, these have so much more importance for how you're building your roster and who's going to be. How are the tight ends? I think the tight ends, you can put them in a hat right now and shake it around and see how they come out. I'd like to see how the running backs look because it won't be Taylor. Do they look like they know what they're doing? It's always at the end of the preseason they've averaged 2.7 yards a carry. You know, what'd you get out of that? So it's about looking at the bottom third of your roster.
Right.
And the only positions I want to see are safety and I guess corner, but how much will you play your starters out there that much? I don't know, but it's all about the back end of your roster.
Yeah, and when you talk about the back end, like you do, the players that I'm looking forward to at running back, I'd love to see Evan Hall. I want to see what he does because he missed all of last year. They are. I'd love to see Anthony Gould, especially with what happened to Josh Downs now, see what he can do right now in whatever form or fashion. I'm eager to see Kylan Granson and Will Mallory because those two I think are.
But Mallory's been hurt.
Exactly, so I don't know if we'll see much of him.
What has it been with him? A hamstring?
Yes,
those
are the worst.
A great history too. Recent history with the Colts with the tight end position especially.
Latu, of course, on the defensive line. Jalen Carlisle, who they just drafted, the rookie at linebacker, who's transferring down from safety. Maybe he can go back and play free safety. Who knows? And then like Jalen Simpson, who's playing cornerback now, who they drafted as a safety, but he drafted as a cornerback. He played safety in college. So a lot of the young guys just to see exactly how they mix in and who's standing out there and who can make a play.
It's just different when the lights go on.
Yep.
And it's just different at this level than these guys who played in big games in college. It's just different.
Yep, you can play in the SEC all you want, which I'll admit that those games, they say it means more. Well, Go to a game, like go to those stadiums, and you will see that on a weekly basis, people care a whole lot more down in the South than they do up north most of the time, unless you go to a place called Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State, basically. Other than that, like there's going to be 100,000 people, crazy people at your game and tailgating since the previous night, basically, and going bonkers for those games. They are a different atmosphere down south than they are anywhere else in college football. So anyway, looking forward to see what they do under the lights. And like I said, it will be broadcast on Fox 59 here in Central Indiana. The other two games will be broadcast on CBS 4 and then Fox 59 again. If you're here, a local listener as well. So be on the lookout for us to be carrying those Colts preseason games as we get ever so closer to the regular season. And I think that's where we will wrap it up for this week. Had plenty to talk about. Always nice to have issues, but not as nice to have
we could
issues.
be talking about Jim Harbaugh. Why'd you like to be doing that right now?
Oh boy, I'm glad I'm not.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Poor Jim, Captain.
Poor Jim,
back
maybe.
There. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe or maybe not. Maybe a product of his own self, but maybe not. But again, not something that we have to talk about.
So we're not going to.
So I won't.
I don't see it on your list anywhere.
No.
Nope. Didn't make the rundown this week.
Read all of Mike Chappell's work online, fox59.com, cbs4indy.com. Follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone. Mike is at mchappell51. Matt Adams is at Statamatty. I'm Dave Griffiths. That's my name. And my Twitter handle is at DaveG_sports. And we'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone Podcast.